earlier today, and this is really trying to look at fan bases. What conferences have the most fans? And we know the Big Ten and SEC does.
Can I preface this by saying that reading this made me sad?
Yeah,
like,
no.
I was equally, I'm intrigued reading this, was what Tony sent us all this great stuff. And I sent Tony a text after I finished. I said, you just made me incredibly sad.
Yeah. No, it's just some truth serum here. Some of it's really good. And it also forecasts what's happening, the eventual loss of Texas and Oklahoma, the gaining of the 4 teams in the Big 12 as well. So this is from a survey in the New York, I think it was the New York Times, and Tony did this with us. The Altamore College Football, this is some things he does that are just really good. How many football fans are there in college football across the country? And again, this is something, and we'll go through this somewhat methodically. College football, the top half of all college football fans come from, according to this survey, half of all college football fans are attached to the 16 blue blood football teams.
Yeah, and that's 12% of the teams. So you see where the numbers start to skew there. So the brand names are always going to be, I mean, that's not surprising, but that's an even bigger number than I kind of thought.
And I'm going to give you the 16 here in a minute, but 50% of all fans from 16 teams. Now, here are the top 16 teams, not the top 16 teams, wins and losses, whatever. These are the top 16 teams based on fan bases, based on those who are, of course, a part of those particular universities in some particular way. At the very top, and it's not even close, is Ohio State. Then Notre Dame with their national brand, UT at number 3. Then you can go down the list, Penn State, Michigan, Florida, Oregon with their national brand, Alabama, Wisconsin's a huge school, USC, LSU, Georgia, A&M, Syracuse, Auburn, and Tennessee. One team missing on there, they're just right below Tennessee in the top 16 would be Oklahoma, which has a huge national base as well. But that gives you kind of the 50% of all college football fans, according to this survey of the New York Times, it's Tony Altamore helping with this as well, are among those 16 fan bases. Now let's look at it by conference. The SEC with 54.1 million of their fans, of the ones that are a part of this survey. Big Ten next, not a surprise. ACC East Coast, not a surprise. Pac-12 West Coast, not a surprise. The Big 12, even though well ahead of anyone below them among the group of fives, way lower than what they are when it comes to those first 4. Now, again, this isn't a way, not really so much eyeballs or wins or losses, but it kind of does fit the script, although the Big 12 would absolutely be in a fight for number 3 when it comes to value with the ACC and also the Pac-12, if not ahead of both of them.
But part of this, and this is what the Big 12 was always struggling with, is that you look at the population centers of their conference. West Virginia is not a very big state. Iowa's not a very big state. Kansas is not a very big state. Oklahoma's not a very big state. You know, most of the Big 12 fan base, of that 11.6 million, about 8 million of it is in Texas. And so that was part of their problem with their national brand, is that it was really, and especially even fans from those other schools, a lot of them wind up here in Dallas or Houston or somewhere like that. So you've got most of your fans concentrated in one state of the several that it encompasses.
So you could take all the Power 5, and there's the ranking of 1 to 5. Not a surprise, the Big Ten, again, total fan base per school. You could maybe even thought that would have been 1 and 2 because the Big Ten is such a big conference as well, with some massive schools that are up in the Northeast in many, many ways. Now, how does this now work when it comes to one of these grids? Tony did this grid. It looks like a bunch of bubbles. It's a bunch of circles. Fan engagement beyond the alumni and the local ties. In other words, these are schools outside of what was the previous graphic we just showed you. And some of the schools that actually have value when it comes to the size of their fan engagement beyond alumni and local ties about where they might live compared to a school: Army, Navy, Rice, SMU, Rutgers, TCU, and Northwestern. Now, the bubbles to the right, there's some of those. You can see there's Georgia Tech, Duke, Miami, Boston College, Clemson, and Notre Dame. Notre Dame leads the way In fact, they're almost off the grid because of their national base. Brigham Young is a red dot about 2/3 of the way to your left, right in the middle. The red dot right there. There's going to be some pretty good news if you're a West Virginia fan, if you want it. Kansas is right there smack in the middle. So those are just bubbles. Now, we're going to have this, we're going to replay. We'll do this segment, put it up on YouTube, where you can look back at this again. And this is to better possibly capture or capitalize on larger potential fan bases. This is not suggesting realignment or addition or expansion, but just the grid.
If you also want to just see this piece by piece and break it down, go to @TJ Altamore on Twitter. He's going to put it all up, this thing, so you can just, that way you don't have to pause the screen. You can go through it slide by slide yourself.
So now looking ahead to the new schools in Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC, whether it's 24 or 25, whenever it might be. The average fan base is based on some of what we've already shown you. Texas becomes the largest fan base ahead of Florida, which would be just ahead of Alabama. A&M is, I think, 5th or 6th. Vanderbilt, still with almost 1 million, is higher than a lot of schools, of course, that are a part of some of the other particular fan bases. Now, Garrett, stay on this one for just a second. Here is the Big 12, estimation of 2025. They lead when there is new expansion, and Texas and Oklahoma are gone. West Virginia would have the largest fan base among the Big 12. Texas Tech and Oklahoma State would be 2 and 3. Then Brigham Young would move into 4. At the very end, Baylor, Houston, and Cincinnati at the end with 0.57 all the way down to Cincinnati at 0.39. Now, this is just an example of where they are. But if you look at the balance in the middle, from 4 all the way to what, number 9, they're very, very similar. And maybe that's why you see this almost, for now, this kind of like camaraderie and togetherness among these particular schools. Realignment of the fan bases among the Big 12. This is what's happened since 2010 when Nebraska and Colorado bolted. And then a year or two later, it was Texas A&M and Missouri. In 2010, before the uproar, before all of the instability, the Big 12 had 27.32, around that number, of a fan base core. In 2020, it's at 20 million. But then look what it might be in 2025, a 58% drop to just under 12 million in total fan base. Well, you're going to do that because Texas has one of the largest fan bases outside of Ohio State and one other school around the country.
Yeah, it's still not great news, though, when you're talking about a TV contract.
No, but does that equal, in fact, Tony even mentioned this. He said there are some issues, such as probably estimates primary allegiance. For example, Gary Patterson used to talk about the importance of secondary TCU fans in DFW. Who cheer for TCU, whose family, though, might be allegiant by alumni support to another school. So that's just a couple of different things. Those are some graphics. We'll have that up on the YouTube segment when we post it, and also as well. Anything there you guys wanted to digest? And I don't think anything there's like shocking or any breaking news, but that's kind of some nice truth serum right there. Tony said, by the way, this is from the New York Times data. It sinks in 3 New York Times studies of college fan bases based on statistical estimates, based on social media followings, location dispersion, and based on vivid seat ticket sales data as well.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff when you break it all down. And do you see what goes into the ever morphing landscape of college athletics, especially college football? Because it's hard for us outside those rooms and those negotiations to kind of understand what the things that people are looking at. So it's a very thorough breakdown of different things that they are looking at.
Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, it's cool to see that. It's alarming, too, if you're the Big 12, but I'm just not going to sit here and worry about that kind of stuff. I'm really not going to sit there. I'm sure there's somebody who's like, oh, my God, they're in trouble, but I don't care. I don't know what the world looks like in 2 years. So, that's alarming that there's such a disparity. But, we knew Texas had a lot of graduates and a lot of T-shirt fans, and we know same thing with Oklahoma, same thing with A&M. There's not a lot of those around the Big 12 right now that are, just big schools that are going to have big followings regardless. Some of that comes with history and some of that just comes with those brands. And I think, we've already established that Oklahoma and Texas are 2 very big brands that are leaving and going and joining a bunch of other bigger brands. And I guess if anything, I'm a little surprised Texas has that many fans, that they'd have the most in the SEC, but I guess the state's the second biggest, but that's still a little bit surprising to me. But yeah, I mean, that's interesting, and that's something that the Big 12 is going to have to figure their way around somehow or another. And, they're not going to have a lot of options to be able to do that. So got to put a good product on the field, got to have great coaches and players, and just hope that that's, something to attract more eyeballs.
By the way, if you were to just list everybody, and Tony's got some more information, it's like a 31-page graphic presentation. The ones that Baylor and Texas Tech and TCU and grabbed onto as far as after Texas and Oklahoma left the Big 12, you're about the four best you could get with Brigham Young right there, along with Houston, Cincinnati, also with UCF, and also, I always forget ones, Cincinnati. Speaking of Cincinnati, this is for